the weakest and most underperforming part of the US-India relationship is our trade relationship.
We are seeing a dramatic shift in the global order.
The United States, one of its largest trading partners, is still kind of shut off with high tariffs.
In regards to the trade deal which took place between EU and India, it kind of takes away the leverage US had on India.
People calling the Indian economy a dead economy when it's the fourth largest economy in the world and growing at 7%. That just is not helpful.
Nation will have a stable environment, and they will look for alternatives if US is not able to give them that.
India is the defining partnership for us, and so forth for India to the United States.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Tracking Trump. I'm Nidhi Razdan and you're watching us on DeKoder. Well, it's been quite an eventful week. There is a lot to unpack, beginning with what is being called the mother of all trade deals between India and the European Union. The big question is whether this will now become a template for other countries, including America's friends and allies, in order to bypass Trump's tariffs and his weaponization of tariffs as a tool of blackmail. So we've seen India and the EU reach this historic agreement, something that the two sides were talking about for the last 2 decades. And frankly, Trump sort of pushed them over the line and they finally reached the deal. We've had the British Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, in China this week. The first visit to China by a British Prime Minister, I think, in nearly 8 years, as Britain looks towards a greater trade relationship with China. And like this, other friends and allies of America are, in a sense, breaking up with it as they look to do trade agreements to sort of circumvent these tariffs. But in all of this, do remember that India is still negotiating a trade agreement, very much so, with the United States itself. Foreign Minister Jaishankar is heading to the US next week for a meeting on minerals, but there's no doubt that this trade agreement will come up as well. How close are we actually to this trade deal? Is it going to happen sooner than later? There is no better person to take us through many questions we have other than Mukesh, Aghi, the President and CEO of the US-India Strategic Partnership Forum. He's joining us from a very cold Washington, D.C. today. Thank you very much, Mr. Aghi, for being with us on DeKoder.
Good morning, Nidhi.
So I just wanted first your reaction to this trade agreement between India and the EU. How is Washington looking at this deal, which has come, as I said, after 20 years of hard negotiations, but clearly sort of pushed along by what's been happening from the White House?
Well, we are seeing a dramatic shift in the global order, and countries are saying that the current status quo, which is tied to more of a might and right concept, is not going to work for us. And so every nation is looking at ways to protect its interest, its relationship. And in regards to the trade deal which took place between EU and India, it kind of takes away the leverage US had on India and basically gives more room and capacity for India to move its exports from India to EU. If you look at the 50% tariff, India has been penalized since August. A big chunk was on the garment, on the area of gem and jewelry, and some of the low-end products. And now EU has opened that market. So I think that leverage has kind of dissipated from a US perspective. And I strongly believe that the reaction has been, wow, in Washington, D.C. And then basically you will see some kind of sense of speed taking place to lock in a deal with India.
Exactly. And therefore, the question that I ask is whether you see more and more countries doing this, circumventing the US, looking for ways around these punitive tariffs. Because I think the point also is that the US president doesn't seem to make up his mind whether to stick to one line on tariffs either. He sometimes takes them back, reimposes them. He's changed his mind a lot in the last few weeks and months. So is this going to be a new template, you think?
Well, you have to understand nations like predictability. Nations like sense of stability. And when you have a policy process which changes on a daily basis, it kind of pushes nations to look at alternatives. India went and did a deal with EU. You look at the Canadian Prime Minister Carney is coming to India in March. As you mentioned, Starmer is in China itself, and you will see much more of that stuff happening. So it is important to understand that what we saw with Korea, basically suddenly their 15% tariff have been threatened to go to 25%, or EU also getting threatened from that perspective. So I think nations would like a predictable environment. Nations would like have a stable environment, and they will look for alternatives if US is not able to give them that. Uh, at the same time, I think you have to understand US is 26% of the global GDP. It is India's largest trading partner, and you can't ignore that. So I think India will have to, while it looks for alternative, it will also have to find a balance with the US also.
Which then obviously is why India is locked in these delicate negotiations with the US on this trade agreement. Um, where do you think we are? On that, we keep hearing that we're just this much away. We're so close. We're almost there. There'll be something very soon. But we've been hearing that for about 6 to 8 months now. What is it that you're hearing?
So absolutely, I think we've seen the both sides agree on nuts and bolts of the agreement, and it goes to the president, and he pushes back, say, "I want more," or things keep on shifting. So I think it is hard to predict at this stage where the trade deal is. We expect it to happen in the next 3 months, but I do believe that the impetus on the EU deal will basically take this deal to a closure in some ways. And it's not just a deal which is basically between two countries. There are a lot of other interesting uh, uh, efforts being put in, either from Russian oil perspective or from the BRIC perspective. So I would say that we do expect, and I think I would say that in the next 3 months, some kind of understanding and conclusion taking place on the trade deal with the US.
I thought one of the more interesting aspects also of the India EU agreement was the migration of professionals from India to the EU, because for as you know, for many skilled Indians, the H-1B visa, working and living in the United States, has been the ultimate dream. But given the way things are right now in America, the EU now becomes a possible alternative. And wouldn't you say that that also is a very significant part of this India EU agreement, that more Indians could today find it easier to work in the EU?
No, absolutely. But you have to understand the opportunity and the lack of glass ceiling for Indians in America is phenomenal. When you look at the Fortune 500 companies, on the C level, you have tons of Indians. You look at the administration, you have tons of Indians. So I think while EU provides that opportunity for Indians to basically go work there, the sense of glass ceiling does not exist in the US, where I think you will go through a cultural shift, and it'll take decades to come from that perspective. You also have to understand you have around 5+ million Indian Americans who are quite engaged in the economic and social environment of the US. And they have emotional connect with India also. So yes, you will see an opportunity with the EU, but I strongly believe the destination for professional Indians is still the US.
I guess you're right, but at the same time, they do feel far more unwelcome today than they ever have in the US, which is ironic. Given the contribution, as you said, of Indian Americans to the American economy itself. But just looking at the overall India-US relationship for a moment, apart from the prism of trade, uh, given that trade has been so central to ties in this Trump administration, do you think there's been lasting damage in terms of trust, a trust deficit? Even if we have a trade deal in the next 3 months, is it going to take a really long time to repair this deficit?
Well, the relationship between India and the US is beyond trade. It is on the defense side. There are no two other countries who do more joint exercises than the US and India. You look at the partnership on technology. India is in partnership with multiple US companies, are basically brought in supply chain into India in the defense manufacturing area. You look at GCCs, you have roughly around 2,000 GCCs in India, 60% are American GCCs. And when you look at what they're doing in the last 2 years, they have generated over 300,000 patents and IPs for US companies so they can be much more competitive, innovative, leveraging Indian talent. So I would say the relationship between India and the US goes beyond trade deal. Yes, there are bumps in the road here, but I think there's enough maturity between the two leadership, between the two countries. People with time will forget and move on in a positive direction.
Unfortunately, to be blunt, that maturity doesn't seem to be in the Oval Office right now. It might be in other parts of the India-US relationship. I mean, I say this because, again, we had a report in the US media only days ago, a leaked audio of Senator Ted Cruz lamenting that the Vice President J.D. Vance and Peter Navarro, the president's advisor, were repeatedly stalling progress on the trade agreement, and even Trump himself was stalling progress. I mean, again, I just wanted to get a sense from you, as someone who's trying to bridge this relationship between the two countries, how frustrating is that, to see this kind of chaos at the very top of the US political leadership?
Well, it's challenging and sometimes it is frustrating. But I think what our role is to keep on driving the relationship in a positive manner. Yes, there are times we don't succeed, but we just keep on pushing it. You have to understand, you have the politics of the country here. You have politics of the White House. You have the politics of the Republican Party, and they are vested interests. People like Peter Navarro, whose understanding of India is so minimal, and to be basically taking a position which harms the US, harms India. So our objective is to keep on nudging both sides to come to understanding. So it's a win-win for US and India.
Well, as you said, you're not certain of where the U.S.-India trade deal is, but maybe something in the next 3 months, as you put it. So we're keeping a close eye on it, Mr. Mukesh Aghi. Thank you very much for joining us on Decoder today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Well, joining us now on Tracking Trump is Ambassador Timothy Roemer, who served as US Ambassador to India and continues to closely watch developments in the region. Ambassador Roemer is joining us from Washington, D.C. as well on a very, very cold winter morning. Thank you very much, Ambassador Roemer, for joining us once again on Decoder.
Nice to be with you again, and I wish I was in India and away from this frigid, cold Washington, D.C. weather.
We don't envy you, but just to dive straight into what we were talking about, you wrote a very interesting op-ed just a few days ago about the state of the US India relationship, and of course everyone is looking at the trade deal and whether that will happen soon, and what contours that will take. But I just wanted to quote from what you said. You said these trade talks, while vitally important, should not be on a single track of defining the entire bilateral relationship in these turbulent times. Failure here is not an option. What did you mean by that?
Well, certainly as we look at the genesis and the evolution of the US India trade and defense and strategic relationship, there are so many really, really important accomplishments over the last 25 years. We have expanded our defense cooperation. We have more exercises, military exercises with India than any other country in the world. We share intelligence, very, very sensitive intelligence with India, something we didn't dream about doing a couple decades ago. We work on space initiatives, the new frontier of space. We are working on energy and now AI. You could not have imagined all this cooperation between India and the US when we were in the midst of the Cold War and the United States had determined that Pakistan was its preferred partner and India was working with the Soviet Union. So much has changed. However, now today, probably the weakest and most underperforming part of the US India relationship is our trade relationship. India has shown this. They've done trade deals with New Zealand and Australia. They've just concluded one recently with Great Britain, and now the mother of all trade deals with the EU. Yet, the United States, one of its largest trading partners is still kind of shut off with high tariffs, with intellectual property entanglements, with all kinds of tariffs from the Trump administration. So, this is an area we need to improve on for the sake of both countries' economies in a win win proposition. It is an essential part of where we can achieve more, but it should also not solely define the US India relationship today.
But Ambassador, I guess the reason why it seems to be defining the relationship at the moment is because the US president has made trade and the weaponization of tariffs so central to his foreign policy, his economic policy, with friends and allies included. And when you talk about the trade deal, and you're right, we've concluded these major trade agreements except with America. Where do you largely find the blame lies? Because we just had a report in the US media about the US vice president, the president's advisor, Mr. Navarro, and even the president himself stalling any progress on the trade agreement. What do you make of that?
Well, I think there's blame to be shared and a lot of difficulty and finger pointing to both sides, quite frankly. I think on the US side, the President Trump, may have been justified in using the initial round of tariffs of 25% to get India's attention to this issue. I would have advised against another 25% tariff that he put on India. Actually, removing that tariff is a sign of goodwill and good intention on the ongoing trade relationship and negotiations would be a smart move on the Trump administration's part. Also acknowledging that India is trying to do something about purchasing large quantities of Russian crude oil. That initially started at about 2% of Russia's oil. It got up to 35%. And accolades to India that they're bringing that back down and making a concerted effort to do so. On the U.S. side, there's a lot of blame to go around with the escalated rhetoric from people like Peter Navarro that have not helped the situation. People calling the Indian economy a dead economy when it's the fourth largest economy in the world and growing at 7%. That just is not helpful. And then on the Indian side, we've had that same kind of rhetoric. We've had a lot of flare up around the U.S. trying to improve its relationship with Pakistan. I think the U.S. has the right to try to improve relationships with Pakistan without some kind of backlash in the media against the United States and India. So the rhetoric on both sides needs to calm down. We need to get to the heart of these trade negotiations and look at the bigger context of how far the U.S.-India relationship has come and how essential it is to geopolitics, to global peace, to prosperity for both countries, to the people-to-people ties that are extraordinary between India and the United States. This is truly the most important relationship for India and the US going forward in the world. No country, there is not another country that the United States can do AI, space, technology, intel sharing, defense, and security with. India is the defining partnership for us, and so forth for India to the United States. So let's, through this trade issue, let's battle through it. Let's solve it like India has solved it with other countries, and let's move on to this, next defining 25-year period.
I think what's been easier for India in dealing with other countries is that they're not dealing with a leader like Donald Trump. I think, let's face it, when Mr. Trump imposes tariffs, then he adds tariffs, then he walks them back and then imposes them again. So there's a lot of unpredictability about the way things are happening in the White House right now. But I did want to ask you, let's talk about the India-EU trade
Can I
agreement.
just interrupt you? I apologize. I think that's a fair point. And I think gauging President Trump can be a big challenge. However, he's also extremely transactional. And Mr. Modi knows this. Mr. Modi knows Mr. Trump very well over the past 8-10 years. And Mr. Modi, if he picked up the phone and called President Trump, and had Mr. Jaishankar, Dr. Jaishankar, follow up on some of this and make this a priority, I think they could get this done.
Well, we do have Mr. Jaishankar heading to the US next week, which is interesting in itself. But on the on the India EU trade agreement, as I was just discussing moments before you came on, uh, India and the EU have been talking for nearly 20 years, and it's obviously taken this sort of the change in geopolitics today to push them to the finishing line, right? We've got the British Prime Minister in China this week, after a very long time, looking at improving relations with China. Do you think that countries will look at circumventing these tariffs, or looking at a sense in telling Mr. Trump that we're willing to break up with you, or have relationships with other people in order to deal with you? I mean, is that going to be the template?
Well, I think to your previous point, which is an important one, and one which, on self-reflection, the Trump administration should be, doing some self-analysis here. This almost reflexive proclivity and embracing of tariffs all around the world has really caused the U.S. some problems. It has encouraged Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, to go and negotiate with China. As you mentioned, it has encouraged uh, Prime Minister Starmer to go to China, and it has encouraged so-called middle countries, as Mr. Carney talked about at Davos recently, to look to strategic autonomy and to align with other countries to look for powerful relationships across the board, not just with the United States. So I think Mr. Trump needs to, and his team needs to look very carefully at, how far they've gone with this tariff issue, and that it is not just upending world stabilization and the old order, but it is also starting to harm some of the U.S. interests in terms of their relationships around the world, and pushing other countries toward a closer potential relationship with China.
Exactly. My final question, Ambassador, was on Donald Trump's Board of Peace, which currently doesn't have members of the EU. India is in a bind about whether it should join or shouldn't join. Particularly, I think, because its mandate right now is rather vague. It's not about Gaza any longer. It seems to be about pretty much anything. What do you think? This board of peace, its role will be. Is this an attempt to sort of bypass the UN, create an alternative body? Is it wise for India to even consider joining it?
Well, I think India plays a very important role in world politics. When I served as U.S. ambassador, both in public comments and in private, off the record comments to Indian officials, we were always encouraging India to step up in its leadership role around the world, whether that was in peacekeeping, in conjunction with the United Nations, where they play such a great, powerful, strategic role, whether that's India's role with Africa in trying to develop ways to empower Africa and teach Africa how to maintain and keep its resources and feed itself, as India did with the U.S. help back in the 1960s. Whether it's India's role in anti-piracy efforts. We know India plays a very important role around the world. And the more they step up confidently to do this, whether it's encouraging Vladimir Putin to stop his efforts to attack Ukraine, whether it's India's efforts working with the global South on energy and climate issues, or whether it's India's efforts working with the United States on space and AI and technology innovation. These are really areas India will decide on its own where it steps forward. India has a very good relationship with Israel. India has a very good relationship with the Palestinians. And it's up to them to decide if this is the right kind of structure at the right time to promote peace in Gaza, and if it's in world interest to do it. There are flaws with the way Mr. Trump has designed this peace board, and with some of the members that he's asking to join. India plays a very important role around the world, and the United States has not only advocated that India be a member of the UN Security Council. We've advocated that since President Obama said that in the parliament in New Delhi back in 2011. We think India should step up in a host of other roles, and that makes for a better world.
Well, I have to say that the board of peace at the moment looks like a minefield that India may want to avoid for many many reasons. As you said, ultimately it is India's decision. But thank you very much, Ambassador Roemer, for your perspective in these how does one describe these as crazy times? But that's what they are. Let's see if
Turbulent, challenging, and opportunistic.
those might be more apt than anything else. Thank you very much, Ambassador Roemer.
A
Thank you.
pleasure to be with you again.
And that's it on the show this week. We'll be back with much more as global diplomacy, geopolitics, everything takes center stage at the moment. The world is now going to be grappling with February. It's only February 2026. See you soon.